Stumble out of bed and stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition and yawn and stretch and try to come to life. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the street, the traffic starts jumping with folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5 for service and devotion. You would think that I would deserve a fair promotion. Gonna move ahead, but the boss won't seem to let me. I swear sometimes that man is out to get me. He likes to dream just to watch him shatter, just to step on the boss man's ladder. But you got dreams they'll never take away. In the same boat with a lot of your friends, waiting for the day your ship will come in and tide's gonna turn and it's all gonna roll your way. Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and you never get the credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, yeah, they got you where they want you. There's a better life and you think about it, don't you? It's a rich man's game, no matter what they call it. And you spend your life putting money in his pocket. 9 to 5, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, yeah. Nine to 5, hey, what a way to make a living, barely getting by. It's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and you never get the credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, hey.
Hey, it's MJ, pronouns she, her, and hers, and this is Neighborhood Church, where all of who you are is absolutely welcome. So welcome. I want to do this prayer for you again by Laura Jean Truman, called A Prayer for the Tired and Angry Ones, because it's so relevant. So just bow your heads. God, we're so tired. We want to do justice, but the work feels endless and the results look so small in our exhausted hands. We want to love mercy, but our enemies are relentless. And it feels like foolishness to prioritize gentleness in this unbelievably cruel world. We want to walk humbly, but self-promotion is seductive, and we are afraid that if we don't look after ourselves, no one else will. We want to be kind, but our anger feels insatiable. Jesus, in this never-ending wilderness, come to us and grant us grace. Grant us the courage to keep showing up to impossible battles, trusting that it is our commitment to faithfulness and not our obsession with results that will bring in your shalom. Grant us the vulnerability to risk loving our difficult and complicated neighbors, rejecting the lie that some people are made more in the image of God than others. Grant us the humility of a discentered but beloved self. As we continue to take the single step that is in front of us, Jesus, keep us from becoming what we are called to transform. Protect us from using the empires of violence in our words, in our theology, in our activism, and in our politics for your kingdom of peace. Keep our anger from becoming meanness. Keep our sorrow from collapsing into self-pity. Keep our hearts soft enough to keep breaking. Keep our outrage turned toward justice and not cruelty. Remind us that all of this, every bit of it, is for love. Keep us fiercely kind. Amen.
Hi, friends and neighbors. I'm Angie Woodworth. I'm one of the pastors here, and I'm so glad to get to be with you for the children's moment this morning. Do you have your egg with you? Number 6 is the egg we're on today. I'm going to open it up. Ooh. Now, friends who have more than one kid in your house, you may need to figure out how to share this, but there's a chocolate coin in here. Huh. And then it says a note that says people over profit. You might need to talk about that some with your grown-ups, and maybe if you have more than one kid in your house, you might find someone to share this with, because people are more important than the stuff we get. That's what profit means. Or maybe you could find a way to share it, and grown-ups, if you need more than one of these, come see me, and I can hook you up. But the reason we have those things today is because Wesley is going to preach today, one of our interns, and he's going to share with us a story about how Jesus got really angry. But he didn't just get angry and have a temper tantrum, though he did some disruptive things. He flipped over some tables and stuff like we might think of someone doing in a temper tantrum. He did it. I think he had control of his anger in this story, and he used the energy from his anger to stop people who were hurting other people. Stop systems, like structures of things that were hurting other people. And he used his anger to show folks who were being what we call exploitative. That means taking advantage of other people, right? That they needed to stop doing that, and that people are more important than money or anything that we get for ourselves, right? But we've also been talking about how we can have big feelings, and that's okay. So Wesley's going to talk about Jesus and the exploitative systems and how we don't take advantage of people and how people are more important than profit. But what I want us to think about is how it's okay to have big feelings too. Last week we talked about Jesus being sad and that it's okay to cry and be really sad. And today we're going to talk about it's okay to get mad. I do think it's important to learn how to manage our anger so that we do it in a healthy way and we don't just have tantrums that hurt other people or ourselves or stuff, right? So I want to read you a book today called Schubert, Rants and Raves, and this is by Dr. Becky Bailey and part of a program called Conscious Discipline. And my mom knows all about this and can help, but it's really great. It's got some advice for the grown-ups in the back and some good habits and practices. So we're going to read a story about something that happens to Schubert, this little guy, that's disappointing and frustrating and makes him mad. Schubert Rants and Raves. Hooray, hooray, a field trip today. Hooray, hooray, I'll play, play, play. Schubert's getting ready for school and getting all of his things together. Do you see his field trip slip? And his sister put her field trip slip in. Are you ready for your big day at school? Asked Sarah, Schubert's mom. I'm so excited, it's hard to stay still, wiggles Schubert. Well then, let's get those wiggles out. Are your hands ready to go out the door? Schubert chants and claps his hands. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, they are. Are your legs ready to go out the door? Schubert chants and slaps his legs. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, they are. Are your feet ready to go out the door? Schubert chants and stomps his feet. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, they are. Well then, feet, Sarah exclaims, start walking. With more joy than 2 birthday parties in 1 year, Schubert grabs his backpack and heads off to school. At school, Schubert's school family is filled with wiggles and giggles and glee. To help everyone calm down, Mrs. Bookbinder, that's their teacher, Mrs. Bookbinder calls on Etta, the class star leader, for assistance. Etta puts on her star glasses, signaling the class to stop, take a deep breath, and relax. See how that spells out star, stop, take a deep breath, and relax. Mrs. Bookbinder then asks the class a series of questions. Are you ready for the field trip and field trip rules? The class chants, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, we are. Are your hands ready to work together? The class chants and claps, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, we are. Are your feet ready to walk together? The class chants and stomps, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, they are. It helps them all kind of get together, right? Mrs. Bookbinder collects the field trip permission slips from Etta, Crenshaw, Lucinda, the aunt triplets, Sophie, and Benny. The permission slips are part of the school rules. You can't leave the school to go on a field trip without a permission slip from home. Have any of you ever been on a field trip and you have to get your parents to sign or a grown-up to sign the permission form? When she gets to Schubert, she sees his body slumped over with his head down and his lip quivering. Do you know what that means? Like his lips moving a little bit. Schubert, your body is telling me something happened, Mrs. Bookbinder inquires. She can already tell just by the way his body is, right? I forgot my permission slip, but I can still go. My mom said it was okay. She knows we're going. She signed the form. I just left it on the table at home. Oh, Schubert, how disappointing for you. You were so excited about the field trip. You may not go without your permission slip. It is not safe. You could stay in the library or with Miss Carroll, which is better for you. Schubert did not answer. He turned to walk away. He felt his disappointment turn to anger. His face felt hot and his eyes bugged out of his head. His lightning bug body glowed fiery red and his heart pounded so hard that it felt it might pop out of his chest. Look at his face. It's not disappointed anymore. It's gone to angry. He was going on that field trip and no one was going to stop him. He screamed, I'll rant and I'll rave and I'll break the rules down. Mrs. Bookbinder felt and heard Schubert's anger. She immediately began breathing deeply herself so she could help him. Oh, Schubert, this is so disappointing. You were excited about going and now you can't. It seems like you were having a difficult time with all those feelings. You can handle this. It's hard, but you can do it. Breathe with me, she says. Schubert was not interested in breathing. He was going on that field trip. He shouted, I'll get my mom to come to school and she'll fix it. She'll rant and she'll rave and she'll break the rules down. Parents, particularly those of us who have been at home all year, I really appreciate this image of Schubert's mom ranting and raving. He didn't get that from nowhere, right? Mrs. Bookbinder kept breathing and continued to help Schubert handle his feelings. It's hard when things seem out of your control. You seem so angry. You don't know what to do with all your feelings. You can handle this. Breathe with me. Does Schubert look ready to breathe yet? Schubert was not interested in breathing. He was going on the field trip, and that was that. He screamed, I'll get the President of the United States to come to school, and he will fix this. He'll rant, and he'll rave, and he'll break the rules down. Schubert's really angry. Mrs. Bookbinder knew she needed help, She turned to the whole class and said, "School family, Schubert needs our help. He forgot his permission slip and will not be going on the field trip. He feels angry and is having trouble handling such a big disappointment. Let's all wish him well." And now their class has a practice of wishing each other well. And maybe that's a song, or maybe that's kind of a little chant. We would call it a blessing. But it's a little ritual they do to support each other. As the class offered that wishing well, Schubert's anger begins to fade. Now he feels his sadness. Sometimes when we're sad, we get angry, right? Or disappointed, we get angry. Sometimes there's more than one feeling at a time. Now he feels his sadness, and tears come to his eyes. He just wishes he had remembered his permission slip. After a minute, Schubert remembers his choices and chooses to spend the day in the library. As he walks to the library, he begins to sing himself a little song. "I ranted and raved most of the day to break down the rules and try to get my way. I'm breathing now. I won't fight anymore. Next time I'm going to tape the field trip slip on the door." So he's figured out that he can breathe and handle, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to be angry, but he stopped yelling and shouting and try to break things down, right? To hurt other people or hurt himself or hurt property that doesn't need hurting, right? And he's figured out a plan, and he knows his friends love him and support him, and he knows his teacher supports him, but it's got to be safe, right? So this is really hard, and sometimes we just feel like ranting and raving, and sometimes we need to rant and rave. But let's think about like what Schubert did. Schubert expressed his feelings, and the grown-up around him let him do that, right? But she didn't let it affect her, and she didn't let it hurt anyone else, and she didn't let Schubert hurt himself, right? Because it's okay to be angry. And he stomped and he yelled, and he may have clenched up all of his muscles, right? And then when he was ready to calm down and breathe, Miss Bookbinder helped him remember to breathe. And we've been doing a lot of breathing in this worship series, right? We've been doing a lot of times when we center our bodies with breathing. And Miss Kristen will help us go through another activity or a little practice later. But when we breathe, it gives our brains and our bodies oxygen so that our feelings don't take over our brains, and that we can figure out how to handle what we're feeling and use our bodies to work it out, and then let our brain have enough oxygen to figure out a plan when we're ready. So friends, if you are angry or sad or have feelings too big for your body, it's okay. Jesus did too. There's even a story of one time I think we could say that Jesus had a tantrum. We're not going to talk about that today, but I'd be happy to talk about it if you want. Kids are welcome on my porch for a visit too, or if you want to call and talk. And if you need to today, while Wesley's sharing with us about exploitative work, maybe you could draw a picture of what some big feelings feel like. Maybe it'd be a picture of someone having big feelings, but maybe it would just be, maybe you could even just draw what those feelings feel like. Anger and sadness. And longing is a feeling when we miss our friends. And I would love to see those, because sometimes if we can remember what those feel like and have a place to express them, then we can work through breathing and breathing in God's love and breathing out the stuff we don't want to carry with us anymore. And we can remember our options. You are loved, friends. I love you, and God loves you. Will you pray with me? God, you are good and we are grateful. Thank you for giving us feelings so that we can be fully human and fully alive. And God, help us to breathe and to have safe people to talk about our feelings with. And God, help us to remember that you are with us always, and that you love us always. Amen. Have a good week, friends.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter, but it's seated in you. So we're gonna walk it out and move mountains. We're gonna walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. I'll rise up, high like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, when the silence isn't quiet and it feel like it's getting hard to breathe, and I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world at its feet and move mountains. We'll take it to its feet and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, all we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other, and we'll rise up, we'll rise, we'll rise, we'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, rise like the waves. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For
Hi, neighbors. My name is Wesley Rhodes. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am very excited to be sharing with you this morning in scripture and in word. I'm going to be reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verses 13 through 25, to start us off. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers were seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here and stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and will you raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. When he was in Jerusalem during the Passover, many believed in his name because of the signs that he was doing. But Jesus, on his part, would not entrust himself to them, because he knew all people and needed no one to testify about anyone, for he himself knew what was in everyone. This is the word of God for us, the children of God. We say thanks be to God. So in this story, we see that Jesus has anger, a very real human emotion that isn't inherently bad. Angie in her children's sermon earlier talked about anger with the kids and with all of us, and about how anger is something that really comes up, and there are kind of silly reasons we get angry. But then there are really justified, good reasons for our anger. And I think we see Jesus here having a real anger that really drives him in this moment. There are other examples of Jesus being angry. Often I hear people speak of this passage as like, Jesus got angry one time. I'm like, no, he got angry more than just that once. When Peter wanted Jesus to be a military ruler for the Jewish people and this king, he snapped back at him and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Also, when he was preaching in Nazareth for the first time during his ministry, he told the people that they needed to love the foreigner as much as their own. And they did not accept that. They did not like that. And he said, every prophet is rejected in their hometown. And he kind of gets in a contentious little war of words, and he tried to throw him off the cliff, but he's able to escape. But definitely some anger was exchanged in that moment too. But what's going on here? What is making Jesus so angry about the people selling their animals here at the temple? What's the deal? So I want to unpack that a little bit and look into what this is saying. In the Jewish festival of the Passover, people would come from all over the area of the Middle East, and they would return to Jerusalem, their like a capital or like their home, for this festival, and they would bring animals to be sacrificed to God for their personal sins, for their corporate sins, and to try to make right with God. So they would bring sheep or goats or doves to sacrifice, and that was like this was probably the biggest part of the Passover festival was that practice. And you would bring, if you were richer, you would bring, or more wealthy, richer, you were more wealthy, you would bring cattle, or you'd bring sheep, or you'd bring goats. But if you're poor, a lot of times you would bring 2 doves you could bring instead, because it was more affordable and more able to do that. But it just goes back to that practice of in the Old Testament that like when you give up what you have in everyone, people understand different circumstances of that. But there still was this idea of certain sacrifices are still better than others. Certain gifts are better than others. Sure, people still think that today in some ways. We don't sacrifice animals. You give more to the church, or you give more time to this group. You're a better, you're a more sacrificial person. So that same sort of thing. So that's what's going on in the temple. That's what's going on during Passover. So what makes you so angry about the way this is going, though? First, I think it's turning religious practice into profit just for profit's sake. These money changers are here. They're here to sell. They're here to take advantage of a needy situation where people need animals. They've traveled a long way. They're tired. And they're not making this money to give it to the Lord. They're not making this money to give it to the poor. They're not making this money to give it to to a certain fund or for like as a fundraiser or something. No, they're making this for their own personal profit, their own personal gain. So these people are wealthy. They're very well off if they're able to get all these animals here and set up inside this temple to do this. It's also supposed to be a very holy, very religious practice. And like I said, you're supposed to give of what you have, not of what you buy or something like that. And so in the same way, it is manipulative of the people. That's the second thing. I think it's manipulative of the people's guilt and shame. So let's say you've traveled a long way and, like you've brought your best sheep that you have. But, you need your cow back at the house. You need it for sustenance, for whatever, for tilling your farm. I don't know exactly everything about farming and the lands back then. But you get this guy here. He's got plenty of cattle here in the temple. This money changer. He's like, hey, you see you have a sheep, but I don't know. I don't know what you did this year, but I don't know if God's going to be very pleased with just a sheep. Maybe you need to be sacrificing a cow, like I got him. I'll sell you one. Because if you remember the story of Cain and Abel, in that story, obviously the tragedy of one brother murdering the other in that parable from Genesis, but we see that God is more pleased with one sacrifice that one of the brothers makes than the others, because one gives their best and one doesn't. So I'm sure that are you more of a Cain or are you more of an Abel? Like, are you really going to give your best, or are you just going to just give what you can, or maybe what mostly your best or something? And so I can see that manipulation going on because it's placed in the temple where they're most thinking about it, where they're most present on that moment. And then also it's thievery because it's exploitive of the poor. I think it's very clear that there are doves to be sold here and sheep, because those are the lower tier of sacrifices from the cattle. I mean, cattle's still there, but it's saying but if you have to travel long distance, you have lots of kids, if you have not that many animals, you need your animals to survive. You need your animals to live in that time. And you get there and maybe you can't afford to travel, or maybe you can afford, and then you can charge higher prices here because these money changers have been able to bring lots of animals into this place, and they're exploiting the poor. They're exploiting those who are less fortunate, those on the margins in these moments in their own religion. And they're doing it inside the temple grounds where it really should be a holy place, where class should be lost, I think, from what we see. It's a place that we're all equal before God. And so it's thievery, it's exploiting the poor. And so I think that's, do not make the house a marketplace, is what we see here. And so I think with that story and other stories where Jesus gets angry, I think Jesus gets angry with exploitive systems, which I know is what can make me angry as well. When people are being exploited, whether it's by their jobs, or maybe it's by just another person, I hate seeing people exploited. I mean, I think that just really drives up anger in me. And I think that does drive anger in a lot of us. And that's what I call it, righteous anger. What righteous anger is so often about. Not that anger is bad, but this righteous anger, that we have this drive that I think is very, very powerful that we see here. But I do want to be clear before we keep going forward to separate this idea of righteous anger with this angry, vengeful God narrative that often we're fed, I think, in the United States. We don't buy into this idea that God is wrathful or naturally angry with us and wants vengeance upon us. I think that is toxic theology. #toxic theology. We don't want any of that. But we have been fed that too often, that God is angry with us. God hates us. We're sinners because of who we are, or because of things we've done, that God is angry. That is not true. That is completely hurtful and wrong. God does not have this sort of anger for us. And that is not what we're talking about when we talk about righteous anger. So, not that. Jesus is angry about this exploitive system and does something about it to disrupt it. That is our model. We should be doing the same. Jesus is angry, exploitive system he sees, and he says, what can I do to disrupt it? And he goes and does it. We need to be doing the same thing. That should be when we get angry, we have this righteous anger, we see exploitation. What can we do to stop that? What can we do to disrupt that? What are, though, the exploitive systems in our world, in our community here? Recently, I think in a lot of our sermons and things, we've been speaking a lot on Amazon and big corporations like that and the way they exploit their workers. We've talked about fast fashion in the past and the way the fashion industry exploits the environment, exploits people, exploits everyone that's in that industry. And more recently, I think at our church this year, we've been trying to focus a lot more on police and prisons and how those things can be very exploitive of people of color and people who are poor, and often people who intersect in those margins, people who are transgender, how police and prisons don't work for those folks, and how they exploit them for gains. But I think there are even other places, like those are great places to focus on. But I think we think about here in our community, we have major hospitals all around us, and the healthcare industry and big pharma, I really do think are exploiting people. People need their medicine. People need their medication. Andrew and I were talking about this sermon this week, and we talked about how if you talk to people from other countries, you'll be like, wow, it's a uniquely American problem that I have to choose between insulin and eating if I have diabetes, or I have to choose if I can't get an EpiPen, if I have a bee allergy because it's too expensive. Those are not normal things in lots of this country, but this system is exploiting people's health and well-being and rights for profit, something that they need. Similarly, in this story, we see these people, something that because their religious practices, which are deeply ingrained in them and part of their identity as a people, they think, they believe, they know that they need to be doing these things. Very similar type of exploitation. Also, I think about our employment and our education systems, the people we value for being employed and not, like even down to the basis of, does your name sound white or not? Where did you get your degree from? Where did you grow up? Where's your address? These things have great impacts on people's employment and people's access to education, and to further education, and to be able to be the things they want to be, do the things they want to do. And this is a monster, giant system that we have that we have to take on. So, sorry, my dog barked, distracted me. This employment, these education systems, are just exploitive of us. They take advantage of us, and they take advantage especially of the poor, the marginalized, those who are oppressed because of their race, people of color in our country, and those just who have less access to things. And I think if we can think of many other places where exploitative systems are happening in our community, in our world, that make us angry, that can cause us righteous anger. And we're like, it makes you so mad that this is happening, that this is going on. Like Jesus has the same anger, like this is exploitation. But I think so often, I don't know about you, but I still go get my medicine for my mental health. I still work on my resume every few months to make sure it's up to date. I know that I shop at Amazon, and I think that I buy clothes that are probably fast fashion. I don't know that much about fast fashion, but I know that I buy clothes that are cheap, clothes that don't last that long. And so I know I take part in these systems. So why do we, though, take part in the system? Why are the people, I'm sure many of the people saw that this was exploited, this was wrong, they didn't like this, it felt inappropriate. At the very least, they knew it felt inappropriate that this was happening in the temple. But why are they taking part in the system? I think first we talk about convenience and comfort. At least for me, it's just easier to go and to buy that thing at the temple. It's like, I got to wrangle all my kids, all Jedediah and Rachel and all my little children in my family. I've got to go wrangle them all down on my trip to Jerusalem. So I'll just take care of the animals when I get there, even though I know that's not a good system. I know, but I can afford it. It'll be fine. For me, it's like, I could either get off my couch and go to my local store, or Amazon Prime. I can wait 2 days and I can just stay on the couch. Also, we think it solves a problem. It's like, oh no, I think about the police and the system of policing. When there is a situation that makes me or someone else uncomfortable, I think often our first thing is that we see something that is going on in our world, like first thought is like, at least for me, it's like, oh no, should I call the cops? Should I call the police? Like, should somebody intervene? Because I don't want to put myself at risk. I don't want to go into that situation and be that person, even though I know that could totally ruin someone's innocent life. And I don't understand the situation they're engaged in, but it's just making me feel uncomfortable. And I feel the problem, but I don't want to put myself there. So I think that is a real thing. And so I think for the people in the temple, like, it's like, oh, like we were talking earlier, like, I need the animal's there. I sinned a lot this year. I should get a cow. Okay, solves the problem solved. I think also a big thing, kind of going from there too, is that normalcy is a big part of the systems. We feel like it is normal. We feel like it is just like the way it always is. I'm sure, like, even the people that maybe didn't feel like it's inappropriate, like, just, yeah, like every year this happens and people do this, like, how they make their living, like, this is normal. And that's like with these systems I think about so often, like, we just accepted it. It's like, oh yeah, that's normal. And like, that's the way it works. Like with Big Pharma, we talked about, like, it's just like alarming to people from other countries, because like, oh wait, that isn't the way it needs to be, but it seems so normal that you pay exuberant prices for healthcare and for medicine. I listened to this podcast. It's called You're Wrong About. It's you are wrong about, but you're like a conjunction. And the premise of the show is that it takes old stories from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, major news stories, like whether it be like a really specific news thing that happened, or like just bigger on narratives like satanic panic or gangs. And they talk about like narratives that we've interpreted about these things and how we perceive them as normal, and like the way they've become. But actually, there's this weird narratives we're being fed, and it unpacks that and thinks about it. And they have a saying on there that like, it was capitalism all along. And that's like what their merch says. And that's what they're like, some of their taglines and things like how often like these stories come back to the fact that like this very seeming normal capitalistic thing in America causes like really like unique problems. And like, we just take the system as like normal in the way it should be, in the way that it is. And we don't like try to threaten that. And even though it's causing tons and tons and tons of pain and problem for people. And so I think also, why don't we do anything to take apart these systems? Really, we can just feel so powerless. And I think we can just shrug our shoulders and we think, what can we do? Jeff Bezos, he has so much power. Like, what can I do? I know for myself, I have a tendency just to be mad. And I'm, oh man, it makes me so upset. And then maybe if I'm really mad, I'm going to get on my Twitter and I'm going to write a tweet or a Facebook post about that. Or but most of the time I think I just stew and I rant in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they do that to people. Why would you do that? That's terrible. Or like, why is this the way it is? Why is the world the way it is? But I don't think that's what we should be doing. I don't think that's what the righteous anger is calling from us. It's not meant to be stewed in and left in there and just dwelled upon. I think actually that leads, at least to myself, and I know in many others too, like it leads to very hurtful things like further exploitation and acceptance of it eventually, because you can't just stay mad and angry forever, but also just very cynical towards the world and very like hurtful towards people's actual problems and actual experiences. And that is not good. That's not a good place to be. But we know that Jesus, he gives us a model here. He gives us the model we need. He uses his righteous anger. He knows his feelings. Okay, I'm angry. This is a good reason to be angry. And he motivates it into his action. Then he goes and he disrupts the thing he sees going on. So I'm going to repeat that again. He uses righteous anger to motivate his action. And then he goes and he disrupts the exploitation, the things that is making him angry for the right reasons. Jesus, he wastes no time here confronting the exploitation he sees. He ends it right there. If he had just talked about it, if he had just been like, hey, disciples, you see that? You see that over there? That's not right. Like, that is exploitive and that is bad. Or if he had even maybe put it, he's talking to the people, he was talking the streets and he's like, do not be like the money changers who go and exploit all these people. Be more like this person who just brings their own animals and gives of their animals to other people freely so that they can sacrifice or something. Like that story, Not that Jesus would be wrong. Jesus has lots of things like that in the Bible. But that story, I don't know that story makes the Bible. What makes this story so interesting is Jesus has a very righteous anger, and he uses that action to drive him in that moment. It's key to Jesus' character. That's why it's put in the Bible. That's why it's in the Gospel of John. These actions are who he is, and this is what we need to know about Jesus and what we should be like. If we're trying to live like Jesus and live in this way, we should go and do the same. When we feel that righteous anger, a good thing to feel, we need to go and disrupt the systems and stop that from happening, stop that exploitation from happening. But I think too often, I think this hurts maybe our good little white Christian brains, at least talking to my fellow white congregants, like, the incident's kind of rowdy. It's like, oh, you're just causing a big scene. I don't know, they're supposed to do that. Let's just do some peaceful protesting. Let's give some hugs out to those who are being exploited. And then we can just like celebrate what we love. Like, let's go to a pride parade or something. Not that any of those things are bad, but a lot of times we use the Bible to back these things up that like, oh, we should be peaceful at all costs, nothing else. But Jesus makes it very clear here that like, it's okay to get a little rowdy sometime. And he also makes it very clear that property and money are less important than people. That property, that money, that these things that are fleeting, that they're less important than people being exploited and taken advantage of. Many ways to use our righteous anger. There are so many ways that we can use our righteous anger to disrupt and options to fight exploitation. But sometimes it's going to be a little rowdy. Sometimes it's going to be a little messy. And might not look great to everyone, but that is still what we are called to do. So what are our options though? Like, what are the things that we can do? I think one thing we think about, we can disengage from the systems. We can take out our money. I think that's a big piece that we're taught a lot. Like, we can disengage. We can not use those systems as much. But sometimes there are things that obviously are unavoidable can't be completely disengaged from. But there are options. A lot of times we just say like, oh, there's nothing we can do to disengage. But there are lots of organizations, lots of groups doing that work that should take part in things that are exploiting people. We can disrupt these systems. We can get in the way. We can put ourselves in between them. We can cause problems to their whole way of being. And that seems like really hard, but I think if we get creative and we think about what are things we can do, like to really get in the way of this exploitation happening, if you think about, especially if we get really down to like local experiences here, we can take part and we can be a part of disrupting those narratives and those systems that are being put on people to exploit them. I think about with this week with our the anti-Asian hate crime that happened here in our area. What are the ways that we can disrupt these narratives that are becoming so prevalent towards Asian folks, and especially towards Asian women, that are so harmful? And I think there are ways that we can get in the way of that. We can seek to change the narrative. We can seek out, when we hear people say things that are microaggressions or just aggressions, we can say, hey, no, like, stop that right there where it is, because we have to take part, like, in ending this, because it's exploiting people. It's so harmful to people. We also can be co-conspirators. There are so many great organizations in Atlanta. Coming from small town Alabama, where I moved from, there's so many ways to get involved here and so many organizations to work with that are helping people in such impactful ways, and who have great ideas and who are from the communities that are being exploited. And we can listen to them and we can be the people that they need us to be. This summer, with the Black Lives Matter movement, I went to some protests, and they asked me as a white person to be a shield between them and the police in one moment, because they knew that my body, as sad as it was because of this exploitative system, was valued more than theirs. And so that would be safer. And they will offer training for those kind of things. They have places for medics, people who give out resources to people who are doing those things. They have chaplain spots, which you don't have to be a pastor or engaged in the work of like career ministry to do those things. Like that, they need people to be providing care and providing help to these movements. And there are lots of ways that maybe you're not the person that's on the very front leading the thing, but you can support those who are in very, very important and impactful ways that make them and allow them to be able to do the work they're doing. I think one thing with disengaging, disrupting, and being conspirators is that we have to work to find solutions and alternatives to the problems we face. One way our city has done that recently in our zones, zones 5 and 6 of Atlanta, is that we have a 311 line instead of a 911 line. And the 311 line you use for moments of mental health crises, you feel like, or drug crises that are happening, and they will send a care person who is trained in those areas to come out. Now, I don't know everything about this. It's only been going, I think, for a little over a month now. So there probably will be issues because of our systems and our ways of doing things. But I do think that's so much better of a solution alternative. And that's like the things we can offer when exploitation is happening. What is something else we can give that like offers a really good solution or alternative to the problem, or another thing we can take part in that does exist, that meets our problem, solves our problems, gives us a solution. When we find ways to disrupt them, I'm going to give a few examples, but I do think this is a place that, as a church with a fair amount of wealth in the Candler Park area, there's a lot of folks who are doing pretty well financially, and a lot of us come from good financial backgrounds. Also, a lot of us are white folks. A lot of us are well educated, and a lot of us are also Christian, which does give us a lot of privilege and power here in the South. And so I think there are stories of people who are Christians who had a lot of privilege in ways that they were able to disrupt, and when they saw exploitation happen, it drove them to do something about it. During the Vietnam War, there was so much exploitation happening of poor folks here in our country, but also so much exploitation happening in Vietnam, and the things that we as a country were taking part in and doing that were truly horrendous. And truly, I don't think we've taken true accountability for in a lot of ways in this country. But during that war, there were priests, Catholic and Jesuit priests, who burned draft cards, because the draft system was one of the things that was so upholding this and making this happen. And without draft cards to know like who to draft, they couldn't do their system. And so they went in and they stole those, I believe, and then they burned them and they got rid of them. And yeah, that was a big move, that they took action. They saw a problem, they saw a way to disrupt it, and they did it. I think about during the Cold War, during the 80s, there was this ramping up of nuclear weapons. And I didn't live during the time, but from my understanding is that it was a pretty scary time to live, because it seemed like we were on the verge of a nuclear war. And these Jesuit priests who saw like how harmful the nuclear bombs that we as a country dropped in Japan were to people, and how harmful they could be to people if we engaged in that practice again, they took vials of their own blood, and they went and they dumped that on the machinery used to launch them and on some of the things used to make those weapons themselves. They broke into a facility and did that to Jesuit priests, and they weren't able to use that because it was tainted and it was like unable to be used. And that was like a really practical way to disrupt that. And they were Christian priests, and I think that caused people like, I don't know, like if that had been a poor Black person who was just really scared about the country and they went and did that, I do think like, oh, the ramifications would have been very different from the law. But it really caused people to pause and question like, whoa, what is going on? Like these priests are doing this thing like it made it sad as it is, but in our system of exploitation and our system of value of white supremacy, that these people had that power there. I also think about the story much more recently of in 2015, after the tragedy at Charleston, at the Baptist Church, where the white supremacist Dylan Roof shot and killed countless Black folks in a Sunday school class. There was a big drive to say, like, in our state, these views are being shared by our own Capitol, where we fly a Confederate flag that this guy holds as part of his dear ideology. We need to take that down. We need to get rid of that. And the state said, no, the state said, we're not going to do that. So this Black woman, Bree Newsom Bass, love her. If you don't follow her on Twitter, her name's Bree Newsom Bass. She's a genius. She's the best. Love her. She climbs this flagpole. She says, I'm going up the flagpole. And she goes and she tears it down and takes it away. And they did not put it back up. And of course, she got arrested. Of course, that was an illegal thing. But she said, there is exploitation happening here. I can do something about it. And she got in the way of that. There was also a man who stood by the flagpole because as a Black woman in the system of white supremacy that we're engaged in this country, the police could very much so bring harm to her and not care as much about like her body and what that means. So there was a man who stood at the flagpole, a white man, James Tyson, who got in their way from doing that. And of course, he was arrested too for that. But he saw a system of exploitation and he saw his role in a way he could strategically place himself in that moment. And so I think we as Christians have to think of the same sorts of things. We at the Neighborhood Church have to think about what are the ways that we can disrupt, what are our resources, what are our skills, like what are the things we have to offer. So this week, I want 3 things from each of us. You can do this maybe as a neighborhood circle or as individuals or something, but I want us to think about something that is exploitive of people in your life that you see regularly, and that gives you a righteous anger. Maybe it's one of the things we talked about, or maybe it's something different. Maybe it's something much more closer to your work or to your home or something that you see. Consider, secondly, after you've done that, you thought about what makes you really righteously angry. You're like, I am angry for very good reason about this. What resources you have and what actions you could take to channel that anger to make change and stop exploitation. One of those resources you have is us as a church in this community of faith that we have. We are a resource to be used. We can help you find places to plug in. We can help you find places to go to get involved in that work. Please use us. Please ask us if there's something you feel called to. If you don't know where you can go to disrupt that stuff, like where is a group that's doing that work, we would love to help you with that. And then 3, after you've considered your resources and you've thought about what gives you angry, go and do those things. Go and disrupt or work towards them. If maybe you thought of a bigger solution, but take those steps this week. Take 1 or 2 of those steps to towards that bigger solution that you want to take part in to disrupt that system this week. Do not put it off. Do not wait. Do not let it stew in you and just become cynical or just accept it. But do something with that anger and go and let it carry you this week. Exploitation is a powerful force, but it depends on the cooperation from us to keep it going and to keep it happening. It depended on the people not driving these folks out, not letting these animals free, and not turning over their tables in this story with Jesus. But there is so much we can do to combat exploitation when we see it, even on an individual level. Like we can do things to as the passage says, to stop this from happening, to stop this marketplace of harm, of exploitation, of pain. Like we can do things to combat that, even as an individual level. And we so often talk about in Christianity and in our church, like we want to love like Jesus, we want to be like Jesus. And there are so many ways that we want to be and love like Jesus. In our anger, our feelings of anger, that's one of those ways that we want to be like Jesus. We don't just need to root out the anger or get rid of it. We need to use that anger like Jesus did. Go, take that anger, feel it, know it, and then go and do something to disrupt the things that are causing exploitation, that are causing pain, that are making us angry. So let's use this week to go and do that. And as we go through Lent, love you all. I hope you all are doing well. And thank you for letting me share with you.
Hey, I'm Kristen Vincent. My pronouns are she and hers, and I'm a spiritual director and a community partner with Neighborhood Church. This week we are considering our anger. Certainly we have a lot to be angry about. So much has happened in our lives over the last year, and things continue to happen from day to day. Things that we are not at all happy about, that we are frustrated about, that we are angry about, and maybe even feel rage about. What you should know is that all of that is okay. Anger is an emotion that God gave us. Anger is an emotion that God invites us to express. And anger is an emotion that God can handle. God can handle our anger and our rage. So rather than trying to suppress it or avoid it or ignore it, let's express it. Let's share it with God so that God knows what we're angry about and how we feel about it. And so that we can express it, and in doing so invite God into this place of anger, this place of deep emotion and feeling, and know that God is with us, and that God shares in our anger, and that God will help us get through it, and maybe even find constructive ways to channel it. So for today's spiritual practice, I'd like to invite you to consider 1, 2, or maybe 3 things that you are angry about. And what we're going to do is we're going to inhale, and as we inhale, we're going to think about one of those things that's on our list. And as we exhale, we're going to exhale with force, and maybe even with sound, maybe even like a lion roaring, to really express and feel our anger. And then we'll do that 2 more times, each time thinking of something on your list. And again, as you're doing this, really feel like you are expressing, putting words to, putting breath to your anger, and knowing that God is receiving it. Let's begin. Good. I'm sure you may have more than 3 things that you are frustrated or angry about. And again, that's okay. So what I invite you to do is later on today or throughout the week to just spend time sitting with your anger, putting names to what it's about, expressing it through words or through your breath, and knowing that God is receiving it. God is not judging it. God is sharing in it with you. And God will help you find ways to get through it, to deal with it, and maybe even to do something constructive with it in a way that brings healing and hope to our world. Thanks be to God. Amen.
For all who labor without end, hear our prayer, O God. For all who lonely seek a friend, hear our prayer, O God. For all who grieve and all who fear, hear our prayer, O God. For all who wait as death draws near, hear our prayer, O God. Holy healer, your people call your name, send your spirit, hear our prayer. Holy healer, your people call your name, send your spirit, hear our prayer. For all who search for righteousness, hear our prayer, O God. All live the faith your spirit, hear our prayer. That peace may come in our own day. Hear our prayer, O God. That your blessed word may light our way. Hear our prayer, O God. Your name be hallowed far and wide. Hear our prayer, O God. Your reign of justice long abide. Hear our prayer, O God. Holy healer, your people call your name. Send your spirit, hear our prayer. Holy healer, your people call your name. Send your spirit, hear our prayer. Send your spirit, hear our prayer. Send your spirit, hear our prayer.
Hey, what's up, friends and neighbors? My name is Kylan, and my pronouns are he, his, and him, and I'm the Restorative Practices Director here at Neighborhood Church. Friends, it is time in our service where we take the time to reflect on all that we have heard and experienced in today's service. And on top of that, we think about the ways that we can implement some of these things in the days and weeks to come. For me, I know the first thing, friends, is understanding that who we are as a church is that we are pro-LGBTQIA plus for folks, and we also work for anti-racism of all people. So, friends, I hope with the collective and communal grief and trauma that has shaken our world in this week, that you all are rallying around our Asian friends and our Asian American community and comrades, and continuing to support them and to uplift their stories and to share, retweet, to sign the proper petitions, to do all of the things that we need to do the same way that we rally around other races and other issues. What's happening in our world right now is hard to digest, and I know we are all at a place of grieving and exhaustion. But we have to step up in the ways that we are able to, and in ways that are healthy for us. Though at times uncomfortable, I invite you to do those things, friends, and continue to work and be committed to our mission as a community and a church, which is to work for anti-racism of all people, of all races. Next is to use that anger that we talked about earlier throughout the service, and to flip it into righteous anger, so that way it serves you and it serves the people around you. Friends, there are so many tables that we must flip in this season. Flipping the tables of injustice, flipping the tables of white supremacy, flipping the tables of these patriarchal hierarchies and systems and structures that are so embedded into the DNA of this world. We got some table flipping to do, friends. And so continue to reflect about the ways and in the spaces that you are in where you can flip a few tables for the good of humanity. And so that way we are not continuing to be a part of the exploitation of humans and humanity. Friends, next I ask that in this time that you would give to the life and ministry of Neighborhood Church for us to continue the great work that we are doing. It has been a joy being in community with you all and seeing how you all are supporting and how you give. The directions are going to come up on the screen. Also down in our chat box, you will have that in order for you to be able to give there, which is amazing. Friends, know that your grief is valid, your emotions are valid, and don't take on more than you can bear. Get connected, be in community, in the best way and the safest way that you can. We love you, and all of who you are is beloved by God. Receive this as your benediction, friends. Go in love, go in peace, go in righteous anger, seeking and praying on the ways that you can utilize your righteous anger for the good of the world, flipping necessary tables and making space and hearing all of the voices and seeing all pieces and parts of the people. Friends, we love you, and we hope that you have an amazing and a wonderful week. Bye.
This is not the end. This is not the end of us. Open our eyes.